Hey Michigan fans, Keith here from Lewis Jewelers, and we are super excited to be able to cheer on all the student athletes that will be on the field and the courts this season. But just like Michigan sports, special moments have not been canceled. Come into Lewis Jewelers or visit lewisjewelers.com so our team can help you celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, or your just because moments. Go Blue!
Lewis Jewelers, celebrate the moments.
Welcome to the Wolverine.com podcast. I am Clayton Sayfie with Austin Fox from the Wolverine.com. You can check us out over there. Use the promo code BLUE60 right now. You get 2 months of our premium content for free. We're churning it out. Win or lose for Michigan. Obviously, it's been the latter over the last couple of weeks. Michigan losing once again to Indiana, this time 38-21. First loss to the Hoosiers since 1987. A historic loss. So we'll talk quickly about that before we preview Wisconsin. We get into some Michigan basketball signing day. The Wolverines signed the number one class in the country as it stands right now here in the early signing period. 5 of the 6 guys have signed, with 1 to come tomorrow. So a great start for Juwan Howard on the recruiting trail. This is really kind of his first full class. We will get into our Big Ten power rankings. We'll do some college football picks. And then our over-unders at the end to wrap us up. But I'm with Mr. Austin Fox. Austin, we were talking about this before the show, but really the thing that's been on my mind all day is the Western Michigan fake spike touchdown to win at the end over Toledo. Just a par for the course with Maction on some Wednesday night.
Yeah, it really was. I actually didn't watch it live, but I saw a lot of people were tweeting about it. I should have tuned in. I don't know why I didn't, but man, it sounds like the finish to that game was just about as crazy as it gets. And it's just good to have MAC football back and some weeknight football. So what better way to spend a Wednesday night like last night than to watch a wild finish like we saw between Western and Toledo, man?
Nothing like Maction. I mean, I don't blame you for not watching. It's Wednesday. You got whatever going on. But it's like, if you are watching, like, anything can happen at any moment in the MAC. So I happened to be watching the end there. I was rooting for Western Michigan as a, Western, west side of Michigan native. And, so it was pretty awesome, and take down an Ohio team in Toledo. So there you have it. Also, the Masters on this week. So pretty cool. A lot of sports going on. Michigan, Wisconsin on Saturday night. Once all the Masters coverage is done. College game day from the Masters. Just a weird year altogether, but an action-packed week. But let's get into the Indiana game a little bit. We'll talk about some positives and negatives. We'll start with the offense, obviously, before we preview Wisconsin. 38-21, an abysmal first half from Michigan on both sides of the ball. Down 24-7. They, made it close towards the end. They had the ball down 10 early in the fourth quarter before Joe Milton threw a back-breaking interception that really halted Michigan's chances, especially after the defense folded and allowed a touchdown to give Indiana a 3-point lead. So that's kind of how the game went. Austin, we'll start with negatives again for a second straight week because Michigan lost. So we'll start with the negatives before we get into some positive takeaways from this game. What were some of the worst things you saw in this one?
There were a lot of bad things that occurred in this one last Saturday. There's no question about it. The lack of adjustments on defense really stood out, especially in the secondary. Michigan was beat deep time and time again by these Indiana receivers a week after, obviously, Michigan State carved them up. So it was disappointing to see Don Brown and these Michigan coaches fail to make the appropriate adjustments. The lack of a running game on offense really stood out as well. Michigan could not run the ball whatsoever. The offensive line had a horrible game. I realized that Jalen Mayfield and Ryan Hayes were both out, Michigan starting offensive tackles, but there's still no excuse for the line to play as poorly as they did. Excuse me. Michigan could not run the ball whatsoever as a result. So there were a lot of negatives all around. And again, the lack of energy and fire is something that I've been pointing to the last 2 weeks. And that was on display once again. Cornelius Johnson, Michigan sophomore receiver, was asked in the postgame if this team can turn things around. And he put his head down and said that he'd rather not answer that question. So something is just incredibly off, in my opinion, with the mindset and the even the culture in the locker room right now, and it's extremely concerning moving forward. So I would point to that aspect once again as the most concerning element surrounding this team right now.
Yeah, and they didn't, people were wondering how they'd bounce back from a deflating loss, an embarrassing loss, an inexplicable loss to Michigan State. And you had your answer, I guess, in the first half. I mean, like I mentioned, the second half, they showed a little resolve. I'll give Ronnie Bell some credit for that, the junior wideout who had a huge half, 123 yards and a touchdown. 4 of his 6 receptions came in the second half and showed some life, screaming, after he makes a big reception. Joe Milton did miss him on one ball that would have been a touchdown, another touchdown for him. But I'll give Ronnie Bell the award for basically the guy with the most heart, and I did that in our post-game article after the game. The biggest heart went to Ronnie Bell because of just how much enthusiasm he showed on an otherwise lifeless performance for Michigan. But yeah, some negatives for me were the lack of the run game, as you mentioned. I mean, even taking out some of the sack yardage, which was 20 yards, just 2.2 yards a carry. And then I mentioned the Milton interception. He either didn't see the guy or he completely misfired. And, both are, neither of those options are a good one. I will say, Joe Milton played all right. He missed some open, receivers. He also didn't see a couple open guys at times. Jim Harbaugh has kind of pointed to the lack of consistency with this offense over the last 2 weeks, just the fact that they have some positive plays, but they can't really sustain it for an entire drive to get themselves down and, actually score a touchdown. And that's absolutely concerning because when you think about really how bad the defense has been, and it's been really, really bad. I mean, Urban Meyer, who I'm no fan of, but basically called it porous defense over the last 2 weeks. I'd have to agree with him. At the same time, they scored 24 points against Michigan State, and then they scored 21 against Indiana. You're not going to win a game that way. I know, they play into each other and you got to play complementary football, but at the same time, the offense has got to outscore somebody at some point. I'm not pinning this loss on them, but I will say that it's got to be better. And it starts with the run game, like you mentioned. It's really bad. I mean, I will give Zach Zinner some credit going in there in his first start. I actually thought Carson Barnhart played pretty well too in his first start at left tackle, but there's just not enough push up front, especially from the interior guys like Andrew Vastardis and Chuck Filiaga. So basically that was the offense. Let's shift over to the defensive side. If we're going to start with negatives on that side, then it starts for me with the offsides penalties. I think it was 6 of them, and Indiana scored 2 touchdowns on free plays where they were just able to decline the offsides. Also, I mean, the secondary got burned once again. Michael Penix was getting the ball out early, but that's almost even more of a knock on the secondary because guys were open right away, right off the jump. People point to him getting the ball out early as a reason why the pass rush hasn't gotten home. It's fair, but at the same time, I mean, we're talking about historic numbers here in terms of lack of sacks. Michigan has gone 2 straight weeks now without notching a sack. That's the first time a Michigan team has done that since 2007. So there's something, does that mean that, no quarterback has been getting the ball out quickly for 2 weeks in a row? There's a reason why that stat has to go back to 2007. Even if the pass rush isn't, that much of a factor with how quick they're getting the ball out, something's off there. You got to get to the quarterback. Kwity Paye's been pretty good. He hasn't hit home in the last couple games, but something's got to really change on defense, and it's tough to do so now with the loss of Aiden Hutchinson, who fractured his leg and will be out indefinitely, possibly for the remainder of the season. But let's talk defense, Austin. In this game, really bad in the first half, showed a little bit of life in the second half, but just not enough.
Yeah, there's just a lack of playmakers on that side of the ball too. You talked about the lack of pass rush, but it's embarrassing the way that these Michigan defenders can't get home. They went, like you said, without a sack in 2 straight games, and not only that, but they haven't forced a turnover either in the last 2 games, and that's unacceptable. You're not going to win many games when you don't force turnovers and force the other team into making mistakes. The offsides penalties were absolutely pathetic. Obviously, the players jumping offsides deserve blame, but so do the coaches, man. As soon as that happens, they need to fix it, and they didn't. It happened time and time again. That's a lack of discipline. That's a lack of proper coaching. Where are the playmakers? I just don't understand why they're so absent on that side of the ball. Cam McGrone was expected to be a big one this year. He's been very quiet. Josh Ross has been quiet since that opening game. You look at the interior of Michigan's defensive line, I think that it could be a lot better in providing push up the middle. So really every aspect of the defense has been disappointing. Daxton Hill at safety has been one of the few bright spots. I think you could make a case that he's their best player on that side of the ball, but the rest of the members in the secondary have been disappointments, and it is a shame that Aiden Hutchinson is going to be out for a while because he's a big loss on this defensive unit. There's a big drop-off with the next guy in at the end, so it'll be interesting to see where this defense goes from here because obviously I don't think they have anywhere to go but up, but at the same time, when you're losing a key guy like Hutchinson, it's going to be tough to make up for his absence, and I just want to see these guys come out with some fire and some fight for once and really respond to adversity on Saturday night against Wisconsin.
Hey, positive spin. Nowhere to go but up, right? I mean, I guess that's one, it's absolutely true. They could not get any worse, especially in the secondary, and that's why I would advocate for trying more guys in there. I mean, there's some guys that haven't got game action. And yeah, we're not at practice, so we can't tell you how guys like DJ Turner and Andre Selden and Darian Green-Warren are looking, some of those younger corners. But at the same time, the coaches can't tell us how they perform in a game. There's some guys that are gamers. There's some guys that don't do as well in practice and then show out in a game. And the coaching staff would be the first ones to admit that because they've been talking about the disconnect between practice and the games. They would admit that there's really good practice players that don't play that well in the game. I would happen to guess that it goes the other way. We've seen that in sports in general forever. So would you advocate for throwing some more guys in there at corner? Because I'll say this, not to rip on a kid, but it can't get much worse than what you're getting out of Vince Gray right now. And that's just if you look at the numbers, if you watch the game with your two eyes.
Sure, it's about accountability and the meritocracy that Jim Harbaugh has always talked about. I think he's gotten away from that in recent years. If a guy constantly messes up and makes mistakes left and right, then you do need to sit him on the bench and you do need to try someone else in the game, whether that's a Jalen Perry or a DJ Turner or Sammy Foston at cornerback. Vincent Gray and Jamon Green have not gotten the job done, so Harbaugh and these coaches need to hold these guys accountable.
No question about it. And from what Jim Harbaugh has said this week, and some of the things that are kind of swirling around that we've heard, that may happen. We'll see if it's at corner. I think that's the most, the spot that needs that the most, and maybe just try out some more guys. But we may see that all around the field. You saw it a little bit up front on the offensive line because of some injuries, but you're seeing guys get their chance, and we'll see what they can do with it. And Jim Harbaugh even said that Monday night on his radio show with John Jansen that he recruited all these players. They're all good players. They recruited them for a reason. Some of them deserve a shot to play if the job isn't getting done. And, I think to a certain extent, you don't want to open the rotation up too much. It's a fine line. It's a tough balance. But at the same time, he's right. There's some guys out there that, we just want to see how they can perform in a moment like this, especially now that you're basically out of the Big Ten race. Get some guys some experience. Again, they're at practice. They know maybe some guys aren't even close to being ready. So we'll see exactly how that plays out, how much rotating they actually do this week. Let's talk about Wisconsin here. An intriguing game because Wisconsin's only played one game. The opener against Illinois, the 45-7 win. Obviously, Wisconsin surprised some people in how good they looked, especially with Graham Mertz, the redshirt freshman quarterback, stepping in his first start, replacing Jack Cohn. He was 20 for 21, 248 yards, 5 touchdowns, set some school records. I will say this, the team didn't run the ball that well. They were averaging under 4 yards a carry in that respect against Illinois. But Austin, I look at this game and I start to analyze it and I start to draw some conclusions. And this is me all week writing articles and preparing for this show as well. And then I think to myself, take a step back. This was one game. Michigan fans and Michigan media know more than anybody this year that one game is a very, very small sample size. Illinois is a bad team, for one. And two, I mean, Michigan played well against Minnesota. Minnesota turns out to be bad, but Michigan actually looked pretty good. They did some things that would have been good against anybody, but can they consistently put it together? I'm not sure. I will say this about Graham Mertz. I think he's a good quarterback. He looked really good. He made all his throws, only incompleted one pass, obviously threw for 5 touchdowns, but he didn't win the job over Jack Cohn in fall camp. Jack Cohn got hurt. So I'm taking this Wisconsin-Illinois film that we have kind of as a grain of salt, and I want to see it out there on the field. Also, we don't know who's going to be out there for Wisconsin because they have so many positive tests. They had 27 positive tests starting on October 25th, and Graham Mertz is still a question mark. Their offensive coordinator said on Wednesday that he had not practiced yet to that point. We expect him to practice towards the end of the week, but that's kind of my overview of Wisconsin. I took a step back, Austin, when I was going to start drawing some conclusions, and I guess we'll see Saturday night not only who's out there, but how good some of those guys that looked really good against Illinois really are.
Yeah, you make an interesting point. I'm going to disagree with you. I still think this is a really, really good Wisconsin team. Illinois is obviously terrible, like you said, but this Wisconsin team was expected to be one of the best in the Big Ten coming into the year, and I still think they are. Graham Mertz obviously had a great game.
So was Minnesota.
True, and that's I think that's the exception to the rule. I think Wisconsin has been one of the most consistent programs in the Big Ten over the last 10 years or so. So I really don't see why they wouldn't be one of the best teams in the conference right now. But I think Graham Mertz is a heck of a quarterback. I know he didn't beat out Jack Cohn, but I really don't think that's saying much because Cohn was very solid for this team. Last year, you talked about their running game struggling a little bit against Illinois. That could be a concern for them. But at the same time, man, the passing attack lit it up. And obviously, Michigan, it really hasn't been able to slow down anybody through the air this year. Their defense is always good. So I think this is going to be a very challenging test for Michigan on Saturday night, no matter what, even though we don't know a lot about Wisconsin right now. And we had a chance to speak with a Wisconsin insider this week, and he doesn't know who's going to be playing for this team on Saturday night and who's going to be sitting out. So I don't think there's any question they will be without some key guys, but unfortunately, I don't know if that's enough to make a huge difference on Saturday.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. Paul Chryst said on Monday that there's going to be some guys that play basically exclusively on special teams in normal circumstances that are going to be in the 2 deep on offense or defense. Now, whether that means they'll be starting and playing a ton of snaps, that remains to be seen. But, think of Jake McCurry or Nate Shanley or those types of guys. Guys I love watching and show that energy, enthusiasm on special teams, but guys that aren't the talented players that, you would normally have on the outside at receiver. Just one example. So if you're going to translate it over to Michigan guys, I guess that's kind of what it would be like. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a Wisconsin team that still has a lot to prove. Like I mentioned, he's not going to go 20 for 21 if he plays, but at the same time, you can watch that game and draw some conclusions that he's a really good quarterback and Michigan's going to have its hands full on Saturday night. Really, like you said, no matter who's out there for Wisconsin. And part of that is a knock on Michigan because they have not looked good through 2 weeks. And who are we to say that they're going to, even really win this game no matter who's out there? So it's going to be a huge challenge for Michigan, especially a banged up Michigan team. And I was thinking about this with the injuries. You have Aiden Hutchinson out, and then you have your 2 tackles, Ryan Hayes and Jalen Mayfield on the offensive side, both out. Those are 2 of your top 4 or 5 players and 3 of your top 8 to 10 players on a Michigan team that, like you said earlier, doesn't make any plays really. Like, when's the last time a guy made a big play? Probably 3 weeks ago against Minnesota. That's going to be tough. Am I wrong that as much as people are talking about who's going to be out there for Wisconsin, if Michigan's without those 3 guys, they might be in big trouble again.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we don't know if Kwity Paye is going to play either. He left that Indiana game with injury, so not having him out there would be another big blow. He's obviously a veteran presence out there on Michigan's defense. We saw how much the offensive line struggled without Hayes and Mayfield, and obviously starting two first-year starters in Carson Barnhart and Zach Zinter. So this Wisconsin defensive front is going to be by far the best that Michigan has seen this year. I don't think there's any question about that, especially now that we're seeing how bad Minnesota's defense is. So it's much optimism in regards to Michigan being able to run the ball better this week than they have the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else on Wisconsin that you find interesting, especially after talking to a Wisconsin writer about this team and, where maybe their expectations lie, for people that are close to that program and what they saw maybe out of that first game?
I think it's just mainly the uncertainty surrounding this team. Nobody outside the building really knows who will be playing and who won't be playing on Saturday night since they have had their last 2 games canceled. And I think is Russ going to be much of a factor on Saturday night? Not playing for 2 straight weeks is a big deal in college football. We've seen how rusty Michigan, for example, has been after 1 bye week in recent years. So we'll see if that plays a factor. I think it will to a small degree at first, but by the time the third quarter or so rolls around, I think that you really get past that point and you get into the flow of the game. But again, it really just comes down to personnel. Graham Mertz obviously being the headliner here. I fully expect him to play at quarterback. If he didn't, there's a chance that the 4th stringer, I believe his name is Danny Vandenboom, could wind up starting at that spot. And that would be a big blow to Wisconsin if Mertz can't go, because there's obviously a massive drop-off from Mertz to the rest of the guys. So that will be the main thing that I'll be keeping an eye on Saturdays, whether or not Mertz will play. But again, I fully expect him to.
Yeah, and then you said Chase Wolf is back up, also was, in the protocol after testing positive a couple weeks ago. And translating again over to what it would be like if Michigan was in that same spot with some of these positive tests, you would be looking at Dan Villari or, one of the walk-ons as the quarterback. And that would be a huge drop-off from Joe Milton and Cade McNamara. So we will keep an eye on the quarterback position. That's really the main storyline of this entire week, especially when you look at it as just a college football fan and you're looking at just this primetime matchup. A lot of eyes will be on this game no matter how, good or bad Michigan is, because it is the, Saturday night game on ABC. And you're wondering if we're going to see one of the stars of college football that really came out on that first Friday night in the Big Ten. And, people are dying to see more of him. So that's really the big storyline that everyone's keeping an eye on this week. And we will continue to monitor that, obviously, as the week goes along. But it is tight-lipped over there in Madison ahead of their trip to Ann Arbor. Let's get into our signing day recap. We still have one signee still to come in Isaiah Barnes. He's set to sign his letter of intent on Friday. We'll talk about that. We'll get to our Big Ten power rankings. We'll do our college football picks and finish with some over-unders. But first, remind you that this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there's never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you're guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 5-star reviews. Give Chris Sabanish a call at 480-562-6267 or email him directly at csabanish@jfqlending.com. That is CSABANOSH@jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending Incorporated, equal access lender, licensed in over 40 states. www.jfqlending.com. So, Austin, I think, I saw this post maybe a couple times on our message board, maybe a few times on Twitter, and it's basically that Juwan Howard saved Michigan athletics, at least for this week, because a lot of complaining, a lot of negativity, and rightfully so. You're coming off 2 losses, which just doesn't happen all too often at Michigan, especially in the regular season. Juwan Howard signs the number 1 class in college basketball. As it stands now, this is the early signing period, but a heck of a haul. We had the commitment of high 4-star Musa Diabate on Monday. You had last week Caleb Houston, a 5-star small forward out of Montverde Academy in Florida, originally from Canada. He committed to Michigan and then signed. I mean, the curse is over on the 5-stars, Austin. They got the 1 5-star, and then Musa is a 5-star on some other services. So Juwan Howard doing it, the right way, doing it the way that John Beilein laid out. But he is closing with some of these top guys, and he's really connecting with these kids. You cannot be more impressed with Juwan Howard.
It is super impressive what he's been able to do on the recruiting trail. It's pretty obvious he was burned in last year's cycle with 2 5-stars and Isaiah Todd and Josh Christopher. Todd, obviously, who did commit and then wound up burning Michigan and going overseas, and then Christopher basically pranking everybody and spurning Michigan at the last minute. So I think Juwan Howard has learned his lesson to a degree, and he's really going after some of the more recruitable 5-stars. Caleb Houston fits the bill perfectly. A great kid and a great family from everything we've heard. Musa Diabate, same thing. And I really think that these guys are going to wind up playing at Michigan. The G League or overseas is always going to be a concern or on the back of people's minds. But again, I don't think that we're going to see these kids leave. I think they are going to spend at least 1 year in Ann Arbor. Even if you do sign your letter of intent, you can still leave. UCLA got burned with 5-star point guard Deshaun Nix in last year's cycle, who signed with them but before going overseas to the G League the following April. So it's always a possibility, but props to Juwan Howard, man, because he has taken some of the attention off the football team and the disappointment that they've been lately. So it's really exciting to see. I don't think they're going to finish number 1 in the country when it's all said and done. You're going to have your big-time cheaters like Kansas and Kentucky and Duke pay kids like crazy and pull in some recruits that way. So we'll see where Michigan lines up when it's all said and done. I think they're going to be right around the top 5. The best class that John Beilein signed during his time at Michigan was that 2012 class that finished number 7 in the country with Glenn Robinson and Mitch McGarry and Nick Stauskas. So I think this one's on pace to finish slightly ahead of that, and it just gives a ton of hope for the future of this program moving forward and what Juwan Howard will be able to do with some of these kids.
Yeah, and it could be a domino effect where, 1 or 2 kids are maybe a little hesitant choosing a team like Michigan. I know, we can go on all day about, I guess, the ethics that go on at some of the other schools as compared to a place like Michigan, especially in the last decade or so. But maybe another kid, does need to just see a couple more elite level guys come to Michigan, and then, they start considering it a little more. This is a place where, a talent like me can be utilized. You start putting the proof out there. Hey, we developed this 5-star into this. It's just great for Juwan Howard to be able to get that narrative rolling, to be able to, and that's not even as important as just the fact that these guys are really talented players and good kids that are going to, continue this culture of not only winning, but a positive, team culture in Ann Arbor. So there's really nothing bad you can say about the class that he signed. They still may have room for one more guy, whether that's a grad transfer or whether that's a guy that signs in the late period. They may have room, especially if Franz Wagner decides to go pro like many expect him to, because I think he might be a lottery pick coming out of this season. But Michigan basketball just a couple weeks away. I wanted to vent about this real quick. I am really mad at the Big Ten. We were mad at the Big Ten a couple months ago when they canceled the football season before reinstating it. But give these kids a schedule. I know that there's some, behind the scenes talk that I think Juwan Howard knows a couple of his first opponents, and we actually have a couple names that we can't share yet. But give these kids a schedule. You got to make it at some point. I mean, what are these Big Ten people doing at this point? And also, just non-conference games as well. Those are kind of set, but just haven't been announced yet. Give these kids a schedule. The season starts in 2 weeks, Austin. Less than 2 weeks.
Yeah. There's absolutely no reason for them not to have come out with it yet. I do think they'll open with a MAC team on November 25th, but we know so little about this schedule right now, and I'm assuming the players are in the exact same boat. We know they'll play NC State in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, but as far as conference games go, we know next to nothing. We don't know who they'll be playing or where or when. So, yeah, it's not fair to these kids and these coaches not to have come out with it yet when, again, we're 2 weeks away from the start of the season. That's absolutely unheard of for these kids not to know who they're playing, seeing as how close we are actually tipping things off.
Yep, and it sounds like it's going to be 5 or 6 non-conference games before a 20-game Big Ten schedule. So if they know that, if they have that figured out, give it to us. Let us analyze the schedule, and most importantly, let these programs prepare for what they have ahead this season. But I can't wait for college basketball. I know people are saying, they're going back to the old talk. Michigan's a basketball school and can't wait for basketball season. It's too bad Michigan football is off to this tough of a start. But Michigan basketball would have been going on already. It would have started Tuesday. So it's time for that overlap. It's coming soon, the overlap of Michigan football, Michigan basketball. It was fun last year, man. Michigan football was playing pretty well heading into Thanksgiving, and then you had the Battle for Atlantis championship that they won, the big win over North Carolina, and Gonzaga and Iowa State down there. So the overlap time is coming. Feast week is just a couple weeks away, so it's all going to be super fun. I can't wait for that. Let's get into our Big Ten power rankings, and we were texting before we came on the air. It's tough. The Big Ten is insane. The Big Ten is a microcosm of 2020 in general because Penn State's 0-3, Michigan is 1-2, Rutgers has a win. That's crazy enough in and of itself. Ohio State will not be playing this weekend against Maryland, but Maryland looks pretty good. Northwestern looks really good, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Wisconsin only played one game. Are they top 10 this week?
I believe they're sitting right at number 10.
Okay, so yeah, Indiana's a top 10 team. Like, what is going on in the Big Ten right now? So let's get to our power rankings. Austin, I'll let you go first again, and then we can, tear each other's power rankings apart, I guess, after that.
I started my rankings off last week by saying that they really don't make any sense, and it's pretty much just pulling names out of a hat, and that's what it is once again this week.
Sense.
No, they don't. Maryland, Penn State, the blowout last week's a great example of that. Countless other examples, what Michigan has done. So I'm just going to rattle them off 14 through 1, and I guess we can go from there, though I don't really have a good reason for how I ranked any of these teams. I have Illinois at 14 as the worst team in the conference. I have Michigan State at number 13. I have Michigan at 12, Minnesota at 11, Rutgers at 10, Penn State at number 9, 0-3 Penn State, Nebraska at number 8, Purdue at number 7, Maryland at number 6, the team who has made the biggest jump in the rankings after their blowout win at Penn State last week, Iowa at number 5, Northwestern at number 4, Indiana all the way up to number 3, Wisconsin at number 2, and Ohio State at number 1.
Okay, we have some similarities there. We have a different philosophy, I think, on Michigan and Penn State. It's so tough once you get into that like 6 to 10 area because you have the teams like Michigan and, well, I mean, I guess you have Michigan lower than that, but I have Michigan in there. And it's like, I think they would beat a lot of these teams, but right now I have to give the nod to a few teams like a Maryland or an Iowa and rank them higher in my Big Ten power ranking. So I'll go 14-1. Illinois at 14, Michigan State at 13, Minnesota at 12, Rutgers at 11, Nebraska at 10, Penn State at 9, Michigan at 8, Iowa at 7, Maryland is my number 6 team, Purdue at 5, Northwestern at 4, Wisconsin 3, Indiana 2, who's your daddy, and Ohio State at 1. Though I was thinking of dropping Ohio State down to 14 because I'm looking at the schedule this weekend. They just don't play a game, so I think they're afraid of playing football out here. So Ohio State is my number 14 team. Quick audible there.
I like it, man. You know what? In this insane year, you might as well. So I also like your Indiana pick at number 2. They did look really impressive last week, and heck, who knows? They might just be the second best team in the Big Ten. But overall, our rankings were actually a lot closer than I thought they'd be. Yeah,
I had to give Indiana the nod there. They've beaten Penn State and Michigan, and I know, Penn State and Michigan, if you look at our rankings, actually, those shouldn't be that impressive, but they beat Penn State and Michigan. They beat teams that are that talented. They've played 3 games. I put them over Wisconsin. I did what I did. Northwestern, though, is fun to I have no problem with Northwestern. I have no problem with them being good. I like to see it, and I think Northwestern, Wisconsin is going to be an interesting game when they match up.
Yeah, there's no question. Another good one next week is Indiana, Ohio State. We'll find out a lot about this Indiana team and whether or not they're for real if they hang around and keep it close heading into the fourth quarter in that one.
For sure. Let's get into our college football picks, and I'm looking at the slate. I'm looking at the board here, and there is a lot of postponements. We mentioned the Ohio State and Maryland game. Georgia, Missouri is postponed. Texas A&M, Tennessee is postponed. Alabama, LSU, sadly, that annual rivalry game, even though LSU is no good this year, is postponed. By the way, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but before the season I bet on LSU minus less than 7 wins, and now they have a postponement. I don't know if that helps me out or not, but I don't think they were going to get there anyway. They basically had to win out, but I think that might help me cash my ticket and be just about a guarantee there. So we'll see what happens. But too many postponements here in college football, so we will pick some of these games. It's not the best slate, but we talked about it last week. Welcome back to the MAC. Welcome back to Pac-12 football. We will start with, let's go with Indiana, Michigan State. I don't know how Indiana is only a 7-point favorite. It's in East Lansing, but Rutgers had no problem with that. I'm going Indiana by 20 points here, not just to cover the 7. I think Indiana big.
Yeah, that spread is a little too close. I got Indiana winning by double digits as well. I think it'll be more in the 14-point range, but this Indiana team is playing almost as well as anybody in the conference, and obviously MSU is absolutely terrible, just like we thought after Iowa destroyed them last week. So I've got Indiana by 14 or so in this one.
Yeah, seems like a no-brainer. I wonder what they know, honestly, what Vegas knows about that game, because Michigan State looked horrible. Indiana looked really good, and it's only a 7-point spread. And home field means nothing this year. So Notre Dame, Boston College. Notre Dame coming off of a win over a depleted Clemson team, but an impressive win in overtime nonetheless. Boston College has looked okay at times this year. They have Phil Jurkovich, the former backup Notre Dame quarterback, back up to Ian Book, who then transferred and is looking good this season. But Notre Dame, 13.5-point favorites in Boston College. I'm going to go with Notre Dame to cover here. They're riding the high off the Clemson. I don't think they're going to have a letdown after that game. I think that they're going to take the momentum there and pick up another win by a couple touchdowns.
This is the perfect letdown game, the perfect hangover game, if
Right.
you will, obviously coming off that big win. I do think it'll be pretty darn close. I think that 13.5 spread is a little too high. I'm going to have Notre Dame winning by 10, but Boston College has done some good things this year. They were up on Clemson by 18 points at one point earlier this year and nearly won that game. So it's obvious they have a lot of potential, but yeah, I have to give Notre Dame a slight edge. So I'm going to say they win this one by 10 or so.
Okay. I like that. Let's go with Northwestern, Purdue. Purdue, 2.5-point underdogs at home to Northwestern. I think I'm just going to continue to ride Northwestern and pick them. I'll say that they win by a field goal or more. That game, 7:30 on Big Ten Network. It'll be at the same time as Michigan, Wisconsin.
This is a really, really tough game to pick, in my opinion. Actually, I think they just changed the start time of this game, so it's going to kick off at 5 o'clock Eastern time, which is obviously a really weird start time. I'm going to go Purdue straight up. I think that they get it done. They're 2-0 on the year. Obviously, they beat Iowa, so I'm pretty high on Northwestern too, but this one is a toss-up and could easily go either way.
Yeah, I feel like every Purdue game this year has been a toss-up, but credit to them, 2-0 right now. Would have been interesting to see them play Wisconsin last week and just see, I guess, where both teams are at. Let's see. Let's go Penn State, Nebraska. Penn State, 3-point favorites. Somebody has to get their first win of the year in this game. 3-point favorites in Lincoln. This is such a toss-up. I'm going to take Nebraska. I'm going to take the 3 points and just say that Penn State is a dumpster fire this year. And by the way, thoughts and prayers go out to Journey Brown, a Penn State running back who had to medically retire due to a heart condition. Feel bad for that kid. He's a great talent, and I wish him the best.
Sure. Yeah, couldn't agree more. But I actually disagree quite a bit on this one. Nebraska should be a clear favorite. In my opinion, I would pick them to win by 10 or so. There's no way I can pick Penn State to win in this game, and I've got Nebraska with a double-digit win.
Okay. I picked Nebraska, by the way.
Oh, okay, my mistake. Well, didn't you refer to it as a toss-up though, where kind of
Yes.
saying it go either way? Okay.
Yes. You got Nebraska big. I got Nebraska either keeping it super, super close or winning close. But that'll be interesting. That's a loser leaves town game, really. Two winless teams, and that will be noon on FS1. That's basically the slate. Any other games that I missed? I mean, I guess Friday night we can do this one. Iowa, Minnesota. Minnesota 3.5-point underdogs at home to Iowa. 7 o'clock FS1 tomorrow night. That's kind of a tough one too. I'm gonna go Iowa here just because they are coming off a big win in blowout fashion over Michigan State, and I still just don't trust really anything about Minnesota at this point this season.
Yeah, this is a really tough one. Minnesota did look better last week when they blew out Illinois, but again, it's Illinois. I was impressed with Iowa last week, just annihilating Michigan State the way they did. So I think this one will be really, really close, but I've got Iowa straight up in a tight one.
Okay, so Iowa for both of us there. We will move on to our over-unders. I have a couple of them this week, and I did save a stat that was probably one of the most concerning things that I saw when doing some research following the Michigan-Indiana game and ahead of the Michigan-Wisconsin game. I dove into the numbers because you look at how bad Michigan's been on third downs. In the last 2 weeks, I believe they're 10 for 28. I don't have the exact stat up right now. 10 for 28. And I was like, okay, what's the problem on third down? What have been the down and distances on third down the last 2 weeks? I look it up, and Michigan has been averaging 10.5 yards to go on third downs and only had, I think, 2 that were 5 yards or less to go on third down. Austin, in the simplest words, not a winning formula at all if you're a Michigan team that has failed to sustain drives because of some third down struggles and other things. And a lot of that stems, like I mentioned, that stat basically says first and second down aren't good enough to even put you in a spot to convert. So really concerning. I'll say this is my first over-under number. Over-under 7.5 yards to go on Michigan third downs this week.
That's a tough one. I'm going to go over. I don't have much confidence in this Michigan offense right now, especially their offensive line. I think the running game will continue to struggle, and the lack of a running game combined with the offensive line's inability to run block is what's creating these third and long distances. And unfortunately, I think that continues this weekend.
I can't say under either. I have to go over as well. And that's a concerning thing to be able to say. At the same time, what proof against Michigan State and Indiana do we have that it's going to get any better? There's been, a lot of that is due to it's skewed a tad, because you have your, third and really long because of a couple holding calls they had and things like that. But those, until they can prove they're getting those cleaned up, that's not going to stop. So Michigan on third down has been bad, but really it's been first and second down that have really hindered them. And I was saving that stat for the over-unders. This one, over-under 0.5 running backs with 10 carries or more for Michigan.
I'm going to go under on that one. I think the rotation continues. I think Harbaugh keeps rotating all 4 backs, even though nobody seems to be a fan of it right now, and it's clearly not working. But Michigan has spread out the carries like crazy in all 3 games, so I think that continues this week, and I think the running game will be non-existent once again, so I won't be surprised to see Michigan air it out in a big way on Saturday, and that would prevent any running back from getting a high amount of carries.
I agree with you, and I don't really think that's the winning formula either. You got to find a hot hand. You got to stick with somebody at some point. At the same time, if the offensive line can't block at all, it doesn't really matter who's back there. So it really starts up front with the big boys on the offensive line. But another concerning one, the fact that you just don't have a run game right now, and they got to figure that out. They got to piece it all together, even with a makeshift offensive line. And we'll see the statuses of Ryan Hayes, who would probably be more likely to play based on what we've heard with the severity of his injury, but then also Jalen Mayfield, who missed last week's game as well. Jim Harbaugh calling both of them this week questionable. And then our last one, just the over-under total points in this game set right now at 54. it's pretty dead on in my opinion. I'm going to go slightly over on this. I went slightly over last week, and that's exactly what happened. I'm going to stick with that a little bit just because I think Michigan's defense is not that good. And, we'll see how many points Wisconsin puts up.
Yeah, I think that number is pretty accurate as well, but I'm going to go slightly under. I have a pretty set final score prediction in my head, and again, it's just under that 54 total. So I don't think we're going to give our final score predictions right now, but we'll have them on the front page of the website tomorrow in our staff picks article.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so we're pitted against each other there on the total points set at 54. That is our show. Reminder for everybody, head to thewolverine.com. You can use the promo code BLUE60 to become a premium subscriber. If you're not already, you get 2 months of our premium content for free. Promo code BLUE60 there. And by the way, check out Chris Ballas's article on 5-star Michigan signee Caleb Houston. He talked to him the other day and put out an article yesterday on signing day. Incredible. Austin mentioned earlier that he seems like a great kid. And that is absolutely apparent when you read that article. So check that out and check us out at thewolverine.com. Follow us on Twitter at thewolverinemag. You can also rate us 5 stars on iTunes. Give us a positive review. We like to read those. So give us a review right now on iTunes. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/thewolverine magazine. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/thewolverine video. But we'll see everybody next time here on the Maize and Blue Breakdown.